closer. I'm going to pull the camera in a little bit closer. And today we're going to go over the United States prison system in pretty gory detail. If you have never understood the prison system, it's because you're not really supposed to understand it. It's the most authoritarian part of America that was ever created. And I took some notes because I have dyslexia, so sometimes my years can get a little bit messed up. I can flip numbers around in my head. It's very strange being an historian and then understanding that I can absolutely mess up very, very simple numbers and years. So I have some notes over here on my computer just to make sure that I don't go too far off track as far as exactly what I'm going to be teaching today. And this lecture is going to just cover the prison system. And I'm going to go down the line and I'm going to show you on the graphic exactly when and where the prison system began. I do that all the time for some reason. Where and how the prison system began and why it began. And specifically how authoritarian, I say it all the time and I'll continue to say it, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you give someone absolute power to lock somebody in a dungeon, then eventually those people who are in charge of that dungeon system, what they're going to do is they're going to create the most disgusting situation for the people who are locked into that dungeon. I'm just going to lecture. If you guys want to chime in or hit your like button or all those things, that's great. However, I find on YouTube that the best way for me to do it is just to disseminate the information that I've learned over the past 20 years. And the prison system for me was extraordinarily personal because when I was 5 years old, my father was locked away in prison, being Colombian, and he was put in the dungeon for 20 years of my life. So what that did to me as a person, how you doing? That caused a stigmatism inside of me that made me not proud of my name. It made me not proud of my father. And I'm not a religious person. However, I have read the Bible from front to back, like as a romance novel. And one of the 10 commandments is honor thy father and thy mother. And until I truly became enlightened with a bunch of information from multiple sources, then I had a hard time honoring my father because he went to prison. And in my mind, whether you like it or not, when your loved one gets locked into a dungeon, then you assume, or your brain kind of, I can only describe it like this. Here's the best way to describe it for you. How many times have you received a phone call from someone in jail? And the first thing that you might say to that person is, bro, what'd you do? Right? That's what you say, isn't it? I've heard that when I call from jail so many times. I was locked up 20 or 30 times in my 20s and I have no criminal record. So you tell me, what did I do? Hey, how you guys doing? Nice to see you. What did I do? I was in contempt of cop. I didn't bow down and hit my knees. And by the way, I have never gotten on my knees, ever. I've been told to get on my knees and I told them to go pound sand. I'm not getting on my knees for you. So now I want to talk a little bit before I get into the lecture, and this is going to be super in-depth. This is going to be stuff that you probably, if you knew this information, then your first area of study was also the prison industry, because this was my first area of study because I had to understand, how could you lock my dad away for 20 years? Boy, that's a little more emotional than I originally had thought I was going to be here. But how can you lock away my father for 20 years for drugs when the drug problem has never been worse? And so that starts to happen to me in high school, but my dad's been locked away now for 10 years. And then when I get into high school, of course, people will say to me, your dad's a jailbird, and I get teased a lot because my dad's in prison. And that created a real stigmatism inside of me. And I'll just finish on the biblical analysis of honor thy father and thy mother. What my understanding of that is using what's called conceptual analysis. And if you don't truly understand conceptual analysis, I want to refer you to a professor who I've watched most of his videos, except for how to study and some of the things. His name is Jeffrey Kaplan. If you guys want to write that down, Jeffrey Kaplan. he gives a long lecture on what conceptual analysis is. And when I saw his lecture on conceptual analysis, I realized that what I've been able to do is take multiple pieces of data, and then they go into my brain, and your brain is a supercomputer. And then I've been able to, hey, how you guys doing? Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. So is that Justice? I'll be on Justice's podcast at 7:25. So this is going to have to be short. I'm going to have to get out of here by 7:20 to jump on Justice's podcast. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Jeremy, JNS, Jeremy and Sean are big supporters of mine, have jumped in and helped me out when I was called a racist and I was struggling big time, and they helped me out a lot. So I want to say thank you to those two, Jeremy and Sean. So now I want to talk about conceptual analysis here. You may not understand everything that I teach you, but if you take in the points of data, what happens is your brain, the supercomputer, then puts those data points together if you have even above average or average intelligence. Your brain is a supercomputer, and the more data you put into it, the more you become a well-rounded person. And so I want to refer you guys to Jeffrey Kaplan's YouTube video that teaches conceptual analysis. All right, and then I'm going to jump right into this lecture now, and we're going to talk in detail about the prison industry. I actually put a carpet down here because I'm going to have to lower this tripod down, and I'm going to have to get down. I put a pair of sweatpants on because I'm going to have to get down here on the floor, and and it's a small price to pay for how many people are locked in a frickin' dungeon in our country. And if you don't think this is a problem, the best parallel that I give to people is when we have currently, it says 2.3 million. I have it at 2.5 million. I believe it's a little higher than 2.3 million. I think that the officials in charge of the prison industry and the policing industries, I think they lie about everything. I think it's closer to almost 3 million, but we'll never get the truth because we don't have a third-party organization that oversees them. And a lot of the information I'm going to give today is from a PhD who I have read her entire PDF, and it is just riveting. I'll give you her name in a moment. But so without further ado, let's jump right into the prison industry. Let me lower this tripod down a little bit, and I put a carpet down here so that I can jump down on the floor and go along this graphic with you guys, because I didn't plan on this being so emotional, but it is. I guess bearing your truth is always hard. Telling the truth about your life and what you've been through is always hard. And so here we go. So now, okay. So now back here, and you can line up the years, right? I hope that I can back this out a little bit. I don't think that I can, so maybe I have to back it up. I want to be as close as I can because I've heard the sound, and the sound is really bad. So now this right here is 1865, right? Now the prison industry is going to begin a little bit before 1865. So the very first police in our country are slave catchers in 1704, the South Carolina Rangers, and we still have that name, the Texas Rangers. They literally took the name from the first slave catchers called the South Carolina Rangers. And I remember as a kid, because I saw a Chuck Norris movie, that I thought the Texas Rangers were these great guys who were really just, and they were about freedom and liberty and about catching the bad guy. And what I have come to find out is that every single form of policing has been corrupted, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you guys saw the Mullen Commission that I read last night, then this will give you a little bit of conceptual analysis, and you're going to get a lot of plot points of information here. So try to keep up. And I'm actually gonna step off camera because I'm literally down on my knees here as I'm trying to just make sure that you guys get all of the possible data. I want you guys to truly learn. I can't believe how emotional this is for me, but it's hard. Let me get off camera so I can take a break. Okay, so now right here, what we're going to be looking at, and this is the very first time, we're going to come up here to 1829, and we're going to come down here. You see 1865 is right here, but 1829 is right here. And that's the Eastern State Penitentiary becomes the first modern prison. What they do here in 1829, right here, is they create a prison system that is based on solitary confinement. And that happens in 1829. That's 27, 28 years before slavery is officially ended. And I'm sorry I made this so small, but every single line that you see on this graphic is 100,000 human beings who have been locked away in a dungeon. And the very first time they lock them away in a dungeon, what they do is they say that they're going to do solitary confinement. Solitary confinement. Yeah, you guys do me a favor. Drop down right down in the comment section where you guys are watching from. Just let me know right where you are. Just type right down in there where you guys are watching from so that I know how many people are Americans, how many are Canadians, how many are Australians. And then do me a favor, you guys, hit that like button. Just tap your like button. It's right there. I don't know if my Oklahoma's in the house. Oh, so Oklahoma. Oh, wow. Wait till you hear the Oklahoma statistics. It is just riveting. It's going to blow you away. And there's a lot of information to cover here, and I really have to be off by 7:20, so that only gives us 30 minutes. California, Marion, Illinois, Jersey. Jersey is 10-1. Did you know that? Jersey has 10 times the amount of black people in prisons and jails than, and I'm jumping ahead here, but Jersey is the biggest police state in America, especially if you're black. Especially if you're black. And so now let me get into some real deep analysis for you guys. I'm sorry it's so close, but I want to try to give you guys the best understanding. So 1829, the first prison system is created, the first prison is created, and that's going to be in Philadelphia. And the Philadelphia prison is going to be based on solitary confinement. And the idea is that you get time to think about what you have done wrong. It's absolutely preposterous. It's disgusting. And so they lock these people up. And then right here in 1836, just a little while later, you're going to ban debtor's prison in America. You're going to ban the debtor prison system in America. And the reason why it's abolished is because why? So this is conceptual analysis for you guys. This is so that you understand. Why do you think the debtor's prison is abolished in 1836? You know, I teach the layer cake all the time. Elites, government, police. So why is debtor's prison abolished in 1836? How come you think that happens? Because the elites are going to prison for fraud. The elites are going to prison for being a criminal. And so they ban debtor's prison in 1836. Now, we haven't even gotten into when all the southern states are going to build prisons, but we're going to get into that right now. So then as we go down the line, now in 1866 here, so you can come up right here, in 1866 right here, 1866 comes straight down, right? You're gonna get what's called the nation's convict leasing program. And this is where the Civil War has ended, but now prisons, what they're going to do is they're going to lease out their prisoners all through the southern states to private companies. And this is what's going to happen here. And so now what we pretty much have done using the prison system is created another slavery system using prison. And the laws that are created are black codes. And I hate to tell you this, but it's just disgusting. It's disgusting, right? And so as we move forward here, and then in 1871 right here, the state, the government is going to deem that if you are a prisoner, you are a slave to the government. You are a slave to the state. And that's in 1871 and in Virginia. And so that's what happens here, right here in 1871. If you go to prison, you are officially a slave. So slavery is absolutely reinstituted through the prison system in just 1871. And then as we come down here, oh, sorry about that, my knees, gotta get off my knees. And so then right here, and then right here in 1891, the government establishes a federal prison system. And why is that? Why is that? And this is where we get into some conceptual analysis. How come the government creates a federal prison system in 1891? Why do they do it? How come they do it? Why does the government create a federal prison system in 1891? You know, if you start to really get into the deep analysis of understanding, let's check the lynching chart, and this is what conceptual analysis is. This is when you take multiple plot points in history and you tie them together. So now we have the convict leasing system, and then we have the 1891 US federal prison system. Okay, well, let's check that out. So in 1890 here, you have 85 lynchings and 11 people who are white who are lynched. And then In 1891, you have 113 black people who are lynched and 71 white people are lynched. Look at the number of lynchings, 200. And these are just the lynchings on record. And then as we move forward here in 1892, 161 black people are lynched. This is 1892. What year was the federal prison system created? 1891. And then in 1892, you have the most black people lynched and the most white people, it's not the most white people, the most white people are lynched after the 1883 case of Pace versus Alabama in 1884. 1883 case of Pace versus Alabama says that if you interact romantically with a black person or a Mexican person, that you're breaking the law. 1883 creates legal racial division romantically. So you can't have a black boyfriend or a black girlfriend. You can't have a Mexican, and it depends on who you are. It depends on who you are. Some people are not lynched. Of course, we know that all of the founding fathers had their own personal rape victims that they raped over and over and over again. And so the 1883 case of Pace versus Alabama didn't apply to them. It only applied to us. And the founding fathers are long dead, but they're still elitists. And who are the elitists? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court. These people are elitists. And so when you get into who was on the Supreme Court, and this is, so I told you this is going to be a ton of information. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me and I will explain it further because I really only have a short time. So now in 1891, you know what the lynching chart's doing in the 1890s. And so now here in 1891, you're going to get the government establishes the federal prison system. So then right here in 1907, so now this is each line represents 100,000 people. So then in 1907, here in 1907, what's going to happen is New York is going to declare that we have to do parole. They create the first parole system. And why did they create the first parole system? How come they do that? Is that to relieve white people? It's really hard to say these things out loud because it is 100% the truth. If you study why New York passed the parole system, you will find out that there were judges who had friends who were in prison that wanted to get their white friends out of prison. And so in 1907, the New York establishes the first parole system. And it's the very first state to do so. And that parole system is going to, but now look, we're at 40,000 people who are living in a dungeon. And by the way, back then when you lived in the dungeon, all kinds of things could happen to you. Because you think the idea of being on camera, no, there's no cameras, there's no checks and balances. If you go to prison, you've been deemed a slave to society. So it's the worst possible thing that can happen to you. So then as we move forward right here, in 1928, the last state outlaws convict leasing, right here, in 1922. I'm sorry, I think it's 1928. 1928, the state outlaws convict leasing. Alabama, okay, so now let's check this out. So Alabama becomes the last state in the nation to outlaw the practice of convict leasing in 1928 because they still have chain gangs, groups of incarcerated people who are chained together to do hard labor, right? And so you say to yourself, what are we talking about? And then if you do some conceptual analysis and you dig into that, why Alabama is the last state in the union to abolish convict leasing, well, then you can just pop up here and go into the sorry about that. Let me lock this down. You can just go in here into the 1903 case of Giles versus Teasley and Giles versus Harris. Giles versus Teasley and Giles versus Harris. And here's some conceptual analysis for you. So when when the Reese case of 1876 passes, what the Reese case does is makes it so that the states of the Union can rewrite their state constitution to create barriers to voting. And so Alabama rewrites its state constitution, and then in 1903, 1904, in Giles versus Harris and Giles versus Teasley, I don't have both cases up there, it's 1903, 1904. The reason why he goes to court twice is because Alabama has changed their state constitution because of Reese versus the United States. And so it's no shock that Alabama is the last state. And let me get a stick here so I can truly keep up with you guys here. So now what's going on here? 1930. And so 1930, sorry about that. Oof, I tightened that a little too tight. So now in 1930 right here, the United States, the Congress creates the Bureau of Prisons in 1930. So why does Congress create the Bureau of Prisons in 1930? How come they do that? Well, because Prohibition has locked up so many people. And the majority, so just so you know, it's going to be mostly black people who are going to be in the dungeon all the way through here. It's mostly black people, 70% or something like that, 68%. And then when Prohibition hits and the prison industry goes fivefold more, then who's getting locked up? Who's getting locked up in dungeons? It's the cops. It's the police. It's the Irish and it's the Italians. That's who's being locked up in the dungeon right here when Prohibition hits. And so Congress creates the Bureau of Prisons because they want to create some sort of semblance of decency. And the reason why they want to create some sort of semblance of decency is because their white counterparts are now going to prison. Now, listen, the name of my site is Defining the History of Institutional Racism. That's what Delete Laws is. So I don't love that these are the facts, but we as a society have to face these facts. If we do not face these facts, we are doomed to continue to repeat history over and over and over again. And so that's why I get on here and I lay these facts out for you so that your brain can take in the multiple points of contention and try to figure out what the hell's going on in our country. And we're still facing the United States Bureau of Prisons today. And that was established in 1930. What does the Bureau of Prisons do? It's going to create multiple different canons. A canon is a specific division within of an organization. The government, for example, the U.S. federal government has 9 canons, 9 different canons. So you may think of the 3 branches of government, but you should actually think about things in the form of canons. That's the most important part. And so now as we go here, so prohibition is hitting pretty hard. I can't read the comments. I'm sorry, guys. So Prohibition right here is hitting pretty hard. The prison industry is going to go fivefold. You're going to get fivefold the prison industry right here, okay? So now what's going to happen? What's going to happen right here in 1934? In 1934, the prison industry is spiking like crazy. So what's going to happen in 1934? We're going to build Alcatraz. We're going to build Alcatraz. And if you don't know anything about Alcatraz, it is a freaking nightmare. It is an embarrassment and it is a scourge on the American culture and our history altogether. Because what happens in Alcatraz are the worst atrocities in U.S. history when you've incarcerated people and locked them up in a dungeon. Alcatraz is the very beginning of, when I reference the prison system, I always call it a dungeon. Alcatraz is the beginning of the dungeon system, where they're going to treat human beings as though their lives do not matter. And who's going to go there? Okay. So now as we continue down the line here, then in 1934, right here in the same year, I'm not going to use the stick because I just have too many moving parts here, and I've got to get through this as quickly as I can. I have 20 minutes left, and I've got to get out of here. So, yeah, but I don't think that that's where Capone actually went. I think that Capone went to, is that where he went? Is that where he ended up going? I'm not sure if that's where he ended up going, but I think, is that where he ended up going? Let me check my facts here. I wrote down a bunch of facts. Yeah. So, and then it just gets worse and worse. None of this ever gets better. It doesn't ever get better until Donald Trump's First Step Act, believe it or not. Donald Trump is the only president in U.S. history to let thousands out of a prison with the stroke of a pen. I had a bet with a friend. I'm not a Trump supporter. I don't support the duopoly. I have not voted for a Republican or Democrat since 2012. Barack Obama broke my heart in 2008, being a fraud and murdering all those people in the Middle East. And then I have not voted Democrat or Republican since, because it's just, you're buying into a duopoly. And I think Tulsi Gabbard, hopefully, will start a new third-party system, So now in 1940, right here, you're going to get the Bureau of Prisons modernizes its practices. And why does the Bureau of Prisons modernize its practices? Because the prison industry doubles. The prison industry doubles from 1930 until 1940. So you may think this line is just a small little line, but these are 100,000 human beings in a dungeon. 100,000 human beings. That's what you're looking at right there. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And maybe you guys didn't know this or not, but Woodrow Wilson actually, it was called the Volstead Act. Prohibition was originally called the Volstead Act, and that was named after a guy who was in the Temperance Society. And again, I could go into mandates over and over and over again. But Woodrow Wilson actually vetoes prohibition because he says it's going to create a police state, prison state in America. That's what he says, and then it does. And then it does. And then it does. Yeah, New Jersey's a real piece of shit state as far as policing goes, So now what happens here? So now, as you know from the Wickersham Commission, if you guys, by the way, I sent out at least 70 emails of people who requested the commissions. So if you guys got them and you didn't, if you sent me an email, I sat at my computer today for 2 hours, clicking, sending you guys out the commissions today. 2 hours today. I sat sending out the commissions. I sent the racist origins of gun control. I sent the LaGuardia report. If you guys don't have those commissions, it's my absolute pleasure to send them. I also included everything that I sell. I included the digital download for the ebook. I included the posters. I included the 27 by 40 and the 24 by 36 inch poster that are digital, but you can take it right down to Kinko's or down to Office Max, and you can get your poster printed out. I sent out 70 emails today from the talk I did last night on the Mullen Commission, and that many people wanted them. I mean, my finger is literally sore from clicking today because so many people wanted to read the Mullen, and I was very happy to do it. It was not a waste of my time at all whatsoever, and I would love to make sure that you guys have all of the digital downloads that I offer. I would really love to make sure you guys have them. Okay, so now as we continue forward right here, so now in 1942 right here, maybe you guys have heard of the parole system. I can't stand looking down, so let me try to jack this thing up a little bit. There we go. I can't stand looking down. So maybe you guys have heard of the United States parole system. And so here's a little conceptual analysis for you that you can put the plot points together in your head. So what do we know about the Wickersham Commission? We know from the Wickersham Commission that the biggest runners of alcohol and the biggest pimps and the biggest narcotics dealers and the biggest human traffickers are cops. We know that from the Wickersham Commission. And so they all go to prison. A lot of cops go to prison here. As a matter of fact, just so you guys know, the Wickersham Commission isn't some snowflake commission where they're like, oh, you know, we should end prohibition. And this comes out in 1931. Alcohol is going to be, the prohibition is going to be abolished in 1933. And so with the 21st Amendment, I believe. And so right here, the Wickersham Commission, it does not say to take it easy. The Wickersham Commission says arrest more cops. That's what the Wickersham Commission says. It's in the writings. As a matter of fact, George Wickersham, I believe his name is. Anybody can fact check me on that because my brain has so many points of knowledge going on right now that I may make a mistake. But I believe his name is George Wickersham. He writes, no, double down, lock up more people. And they do. Because remember, after prohibition is abolished, this is in the height of the Lochner era. If you guys don't know what the Lochner era is, the Lochner era is going to go from 1897 until 1938. Now they're going to say it ends in 1937, but it's just not true because Caroline Products is established in 1938, which gives a legal monopoly to the dairy industry. And so this is the Lochner era right here, 1897 until 1937. And why is the Lochner era so relevant in this talk right here? Because as soon as alcohol is then decriminalized, and I'm pretty sure it's with the 21st Amendment, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's criminalized with the 18th and then decriminalized with the 21st. So it's easy to remember that because when you're 18, you get drunk, and then on your 21st birthday, you get drunk. And so, so that's how I was able to remember those things. So now in 1942, they're going to create the parole establishment. And so why do they create the parole establishment? Because they locked up so many cops. There's so many cops in prison for running alcohol. And so now I'm sorry, my ADD is a little crazy. And I've got 14 minutes left before I've got to get off. And so now what happens? George Wickersham and the Lochner era, thank you for letting me make my brain work for a second. The Lochner era, what it's about is about giving all of the power to big corporations. That's what the entire Lochner era is about. And that's based on the 1905 case of Lochner versus New York. I actually don't have it on the graphic. I wish that I did. But it's called Lochner versus New York. And I challenge you to go to oyez.org and read Lochner versus New York. Read the facts of the case. It's absolutely disgusting. And the Supreme Court holds in favor of the big ovens, the big bread makers. It's about a guy named Lochner, obviously, who sues the state of New York because the living conditions of which he has to make bread in are so horrifically bad that he's sleeping on the table, right? The pipes inside of the giant buildings where they bake the bread, all the pipes are dripping down boiling water. So he works for 18 hours a day, 19 hours a day, Lochner does, and then he sleeps on the same table where he kneads bread and sticks it into the oven. And so now when prohibition is ended with the 21st Amendment, what's going to happen is the Lochner era is in full effect. They're still giving all the benefits to big business. And the way they're giving all the benefits to big business is under the 14th Amendment, that you have equal protection under the law. Corporations also have equal protection under the law. So the bread makers in New York are more than entitled to write a contract, and if you agree to it, well, then you agree to it. So now when prohibition is ended, what happens is they then give all of the contracts to sell, distribute alcohol to big businesses. Sounds like marijuana, doesn't it? Does it sound like marijuana a little bit? It kind of does, right? Are you guys putting it together now? Are you starting to see what's happening? And that was in when? 1931, and now we fast forward to 2020, and where's all the marijuana businesses going? Right now it's a mom and pop store, but pretty soon Marlboro and all those other companies will jump in and they will be the biggest distributors of marijuana. And the government, the powers that be, will give all of the power to government. And by the way, the Lochner era, just so you know, this is when the fight for minimum wage begins. And just so you know, there's a guy named Jack Rakove. He's a professor at Stanford. I've watched a few of his lectures. I always will take in a new lecture. Jack Rakove. He gives a lecture on the minimum wage. And I want you to think about this just for a moment. They give all the contracts to big business and they create, I believe it's the 1930, so many years in my head. It's the Alcohol Act of 1934. I'm pretty sure. The Alcohol Act of 1934. And what that says is that you as an individual, you can't distribute alcohol. You can't do it. And so the people who are getting locked up, it sounds like, and this is going to be a repeat of history here, all the people being locked up, the Wickersham Commission says lock people up for alcohol. You keep on locking people up all the way through the 1930s until 1942. And then there's so many cops in prison because they keep doing the same job even after the prohibition is ended that they get locked up and go to prison too. And so the 1942 Parole Act is created so that police can get out of prison. And then I think it's by, and let me make sure and then I think I have some notes over here. I think it's by 19, it says that hitting 35-year high. Okay, so then by 44, most of the white people in prison are let out on parole. I mean, you can't make this shit up. You know what I'm saying? You can't. This is just so, it's just like not a great history that we have. We create a prison system so that we can lock away black people after the 13th Amendment. And then Virginia says that you're a slave forever in 1871. And then by 1942, you're letting people out of prison for running alcohol. You know, I never did find out if Roy Olmsted was ever let out of prison. Can you guys look that up for me? Can anybody let me know? The 1928 case of Olmsted versus the United States. This is where Roy Olmsted is convicted of bootlegging alcohol and his convictions upheld by William Howard Taft. And then I don't know if Roy Olmsted was ever pardoned or if he got out of prison. I never got to that data. Because I was just so enamored with reading the Wickersham that I just was like, forget Roy. You know, and I'm going to clean up my language. I'm going to make sure my language stays clear because a lot of parents have contacted me and said that they're letting their kids see this video so that they can learn history the proper way. Because as you know, we teach the unedited history of the United States of America. It's unedited, not the garbage that you learn in colleges and schools today. Because most of the history that you guys learned, and I'm a Gen Xer, so most of the history that I learned is from a guy named William Archibald Dunnan. William Archibald Dunnan. And he's going to be exposed even just recently by a historian named Eric Foner, F-O-N-E-R, Eric Foner. And he is I think that Eric Foner, I don't want to get lost. So in 1942, you create the parole system here. Okay, so now what's going to happen? What's going to happen? In 1941, I'm sorry about that. In 1941, the U.S. attorney, the Secretary of State in 1941, he's going to ban convict leasing. So convict leasing lasts from when? From when? From the 1870s here all the way here until 1941. And why do they end convict leasing? Well, because the cops are in prison. And white people, Italians and Irish are in prison. Because they're the biggest runners of alcohol that there is. And so that's I mean, to say that everything in our country is based on race would literally be an understatement. Our entire criminal justice system, even the goodies and the bad and the nuance of the criminal justice system, is 100,000% based on race. And I hate to be the one to tell you that because my family's been here since we got off the Mayflower. That's how long my family's been here. My family crest is beautiful. You should see it. I'll share it with you guys sometime. So now as we're going to press forward right here. Okay, so now what's going to happen? In 1946, you're going to have the Battle of Alcatraz. All right? And what's going to happen? This is going to a handful of inmates predominantly staged a violent attempt in May to get out of prison. And it's called the Battle of Alcatraz. If you guys have not seen the Battle of Alcatraz, what's really pathetic, what's really just the most pathetic thing that just, it literally just pisses me. I mean, I get goosebumps up and down my arms. It just pisses me off. Because when you read the Battle of Alcatraz, what the focus is on are the 14 guards who were injured. Can you imagine what those guards were doing to people? Could you even imagine for a moment what those guards were doing to human beings locked inside of a dungeon? Could you just try to imagine for a moment, right? Because remember, we have all kinds of things going on inside of the prison that have never happened before, right? We create a dungeon system with Alcatraz. And so now, right here, as we continue down the line right here, in 1859, right here, remember the model penal code, 1859, the model penal code is going to be starting to rip by Henry Wechsler and by Harry Blackmun. Both of the, Harry Blackmun's going to end up on the Supreme Court. And so the model penal code is going to come out in 1862. In 1962, the model penal code is going to come out. But in 1959, right here, forgive me, I'm so sorry. The correction model adapts the medical model of corrections, gained traction it started in the 1950s. According to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the theory stated that rehabilitation to provide a cure for behavior. You're going to get a cure for behavior. And you guys can look that up. It's called the medical model. That's what it's called. And you're going to diagnose incarceration in persons through a classification system. And so where are they getting that classification system? Well, they're getting it directly from what's called the Institute of Legal. It's going to turn into the bar. It's called the Institute of Legal Affairs. I'm messing up the name on that. Just look up the model penal code. And the reason why I'm tying these things together is because the model penal code has been being written since 1952. They scrap it in 1954, start over when desegregation happens, and they start to write it again. And now they're going to write it again for the next 8-9 years before it's going to be peer reviewed. In which year? Guess what year it is? Guess which year the model penal code is going to be reviewed? 1959. And so now they're going to re-examine prisoners based on what's called mens rea, MENSREA, mens rea. And mens rea has 4 different classifications in it. It's going to be if you committed a crime, if you committed a crime negligently, foolishly, there's 4 different mens rea statuses. And so they're going to leak this, though, to the prison industry. And mens rea is going to be, I'm sorry, when I'm on the spot and I'm live, it's just a little harder for me to regurgitate all the information in my brain. And it'll bug me, and it'll pop into my head. But, and I literally have 1 minute left, so I'm really sorry. So I wanted to get into some statistics for you guys, but let me just read some. Let me just read some. And I created this. I created this today because I wanted to really give you guys the best conceptual analysis that I could possibly give to you guys. And so let me just give you what the prison system is today and exactly what we're living through, and how bad it is, especially if you're a person of color. It's really, really atrocious. It is just the worst thing you could possibly imagine. It really is. And I'll give you the statistics and then this will be the last thing, and I'll just jump into this real quick so you guys can kind of get an understanding of how bad the penal system is. And these are national statistics, and this is by Ashley. I'll put the last name in the title here. But now this is the United States of America here, And so when you go down the line, when I talked about Jersey earlier, let me back this up a little bit. I literally have 2 minutes and I've got to get off. I got 2 minutes and I got to get off. I got to get off in 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to get this as quickly as I possibly can. So now when you talk about prison, right? So I talked about New Jersey earlier. New Jersey has 10-to-1 black people to white people. Pennsylvania here. Pennsylvania has 7-to-1. New York has 7-to-1. Is it Maine? Maine is at 7-to-1. Wisconsin is 10-to-1. 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 And then California is 7-to-1 of black to white people living in a dungeon. Black to white people living in a dungeon. And so we've created this absolute nightmare scenario where the original police are slave catchers, and then we just continue to perpetuate that throughout the history of time. And that's why we have a prison system with over 2.5 million people locked in a dungeon. And the analysis that I give for you guys is just imagine you as a human being, right? With 2.5 million people in a dungeon, just go ahead and cut off your thumb. And now walk around and tell me how you're doing. You're doing horrifically bad. Just cut off your pinky. Just cut off your pinky. Just cut off your pinky, right? The reason why our country is in such disarray, and whether you're on the strong left or strong right, left, right, or center left, center right, is because we have 2.5 million people in dungeons. That's why. That's why. If you don't know why our country is shit right now, it's because of the prison system. We keep locking people up for drugs, and the war on drugs has ruined our country. And by the way, I talked earlier about the cannons. Richard Nixon, 1971, he directs all 9 cannons of the federal government to point all of their policies and bureaucracy at the war on drugs. And those policies are still in effect today. We need new leadership. We absolutely need new leadership. We need a third party to rise that is both pro-Second Amendment and pro-choice. We need a third party to rise. I have written a party called the Centrist Peace and Liberty Party. I wrote it out. It's all written out. I just don't have time to do 40 million different things. And by the way, if you guys ever contact me, make sure you contact me through email. A lot of people have my phone number because I was doxxed, and so I give my phone number out to everybody. If you guys ever want to reach me, please make sure that Millhouse. So Ian Millhiser is a guy who does the same amount of studies that I do, and he's like officially smart, like Ivy League smart. I'm just smart from the internet and just being a tenacious reader where I read everything. I read absolutely. If you send me a document, I can't help it. I have to read it. I have to know the information. It drives me absolutely crazy. It drives me absolutely crazy. But I have to know the information. If I don't know it, it drives me crazy. Someone today sent me a case called Hale versus Hinckley from 1905. I believe the gentleman's name is Mike. So I cannot wait to read Hale versus Hinckley. I cannot wait to get into it. I got to go, guys. You guys, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate your time. This is not done. This lecture is not done. This lecture is going to take 2 hours. Obviously, there's just so much information to cover. I really appreciate you guys coming. And then let me throw a promo in here. If you guys have not gone by my website, Delete Laws, please pick up one of my posters or my ebook. I could use your support. Jeremy's in the room. Thank you so much for your support this last month, Jeremy. These are my cup of coffee funds. If you guys are so inclined and you learned anything at all from me today, please pick me up a cup of coffee. I send that out in emails all the time because I realize our economy sucks and everybody's struggling. But if I can just get a cup of coffee, then I can continue to press forward. Okay, I got to go right now. It's time for me to go. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. And God bless you all. All right, take care of yourselves.